Welcome. This is Exopolitics TV, and we're once again with uh, expert Leuren Moret. And today is Friday, May 20th, 2011. Welcome.
Thank you, Alfred. Very nice to be on again, but I don't think my message today is such a cheery one.
Well, let me see if I understand what the message is. And that is that you have found that, in fact, the Fukushima tectonic nuclear warfare event of March 11, 2011, which has now spread this deadly radiation throughout the northern hemisphere and down into the southern hemisphere, and is implementing a policy of depopulation, was in fact monitored by international partners. Is that what you're saying, or is there more?
That is correct. It was rather shocking to discover that. And I also have much more forensic evidence now that HAARP was used on this event, and that these international partners were conducting an observational experiment at the time this was happening.
Could you just, before we get underway with all of the details, just name some of those international partners?
Well, it would be Japan, Britain, China. I've forgotten all of them. Just a minute. Russia. I guess I'll get to it when we get to that part of it.
I just wanted to see what exactly, the level. Now I know that you've put together a lot of graphs and charts, and we'll be putting them up in a special slideshow. So could you begin to walk us through all of the findings that you've found?
Yes, just to go back to the international partners, it's called the European Incoherent Scatter Scientific Association, or ISCAT. And it's a leading world scientific organization, or at least they call themselves one. I think I would agree with them. And the headquarters is in Kiruna, Sweden. That's where the very near the Tromsø, Norway HAARP facility, which the partners there are Britain, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Japan, China, and Finland. And Alfred, this facility was founded, this association was founded in 1975. So it was right at the very beginning of HAARP development. And Russia was also a participant in this experiment at the time of the Fukushima earthquake and disaster.
Right. Yeah.
And that's notable because Russia has the 7 largest HAARP transmitters in the world, bigger than ours even, and they always have. So it's actually Russia that has been the lead scientific developer of HAARP, which is rather surprising, but not so surprising when you realize that they conducted very serious and very extensive scientific experiments in the Arctic since 1898. So in order to weaponize the ionosphere and the Earth's magnetic field, they certainly knew more about the Arctic than any other country in the world, with a over 100-year history of gathering data there. and the Arctic nuclear bomb tests were conducted in order to inject huge amounts of highly charged radioactive particles high into the ionosphere, and then observe the behavior of those highly charged particles interacting with the Earth's magnetic field in the Van Allen belts. And that is how they were able to develop HAARP as a weapon of mass destruction. And it's also how they can manipulate weather, climate, um, earthquake, their tectonic warfare. It has a global influence, actually.
What was this the terrible weapon that Nikita Khrushchev was referring to?
Yes. But surprise, surprise, the US and the Soviets were secret partners developing it. So we co-developed it. Their scientists came from the Soviet Union to the Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab, and we sent our scientists with money and technology and even a 40-ton magnet to the Soviet Union. And I'm sure a lot of the experimentation, it was done in these northern latitudes of the Soviet Union, close to the Arctic Circle, where their HAARP facilities are.
And what do you make of this recent video clip of Zhirinovsky of the Russian Duma on, I think it was Georgian national TV, where he revealed, that HAARP had done Japan and threatened any nation not subjecting itself to the big four: Russia, China, UK, and USA is essentially toast.
Well, I thought that was very interesting, and I did take note of that. But you have to always be very careful about media and what is on the internet, and so it could have been a false network broadcast, done in a studio and then put on YouTube. We really don't know.
Yeah, kind of a
But
psyops, right?
yeah, psyops. But since I know that they have the biggest HARP facilities in the world, and they have the power of veto on the UN Security Council, I'm beginning to believe that the Soviet Union and now Russia have been a very major player behind the scenes with the other controlling entities on the planet, and that would be the British Dope Incorporated, the British royal family, and the Crown, which is the City of London, the international financiers.
Well, of
I
course,
think I think Russia really does have a hidden hand in this.
yeah. I mean, communism is a Zionist in invention, and Zionism essentially comes out of Russia. So, uh, there's a very close kind of historical and bloodlines connection there.
Yes, that's true, and that's certainly the fingerprint of modus operandi for the last millennia, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, yeah. So let's get back to, and also before we finish this broadcast, I'd like to give people an update on where the radiation stands, and
Yes.
because that is utmost, I know, on people's minds, and there is an information blackout on this, and also uh, what kind of health data and health measures and nutrition measures people can take. But let's go on with this.
Yes, on May 18th, an article was posted in the Technology Review, which is published by MIT in Boston, one of the two big military contractors for weapons for the Pentagon and U.S. government. And it was titled Atmosphere Above Japan Heated Rapidly before the magnitude 9 earthquake, which was at Fukushima. And what this scientist said is that infrared emissions above the epicenter of it's actually called the Tohoku earthquake, which damaged Fukushima and northern Japan. It increased dramatically in the days before the devastating earthquake in Japan. And he posted a series of very, very interesting maps of Japan where you can see the plate boundaries, the tectonic plate boundaries. There are 4 of them around Japan or under Japan. And on March the 5th, you could see that there were heating spots in the north of Japan and in Kyushu, the south of Japan, which is on the Asian plate, subducting under Japan. Japan's just kind of floating or teetering above on the edge of that. And there was also a spot near Hamaoka, which is southeast of Tokyo, and I guess southwest of Tokyo. And so on the Philippine side of that plate boundary, just offshore, they were heating there too. And these are fairly round, fairly circular heating spots, and that would be characteristic of HAARP. On March 6th and 7th, there was no activity, but on March 8th, there was heavy, I would call it burning or major heating, and it actually triggered a 7.2 earthquake, Richter scale earthquake, up in the north end of Honshu, which is the main island of Japan where Fukushima is also located. So on the 9th, there was further heating, and where that earthquake occurred, and there was much heavier heating on the sort of the Tokyo area, the Kanto area of Japan, kind of in the middle of the big island of Honshu. On the 10th, there was very, very intense heating up above northeast of Fukushima in the area where that earthquake had occurred, and the 7.2 earthquake. And there was also more down on the southern end of Tokyo, next to the Philippine plate boundary. Now, on the 11th, the day that the earthquake occurred, there was very heavy burning offshore from Fukushima, and slightly where it had in the sort of Chiba area offshore. And of course, that's the day the earthquake happened. Now, what's interesting is there was more heating, more than any other time on the 12th. And this time it was at the junction of the Philippine plate, the Asian plate, and the North American plate, which covers the Pacific. And that's very, very interesting because 3 of those burn spots were in a straight line, which was from northwest to southeast. So this is really, really interesting. And the magnetometer readings at Gakona, Alaska, actually correlate with these activities that were measured with the infrared light over the islands of Japan, the archipelago. And those measurements would have been made by probably 5 geosynchronous Los Alamos satellites that were used to observe the Kashmir earthquake. I believe it was in 2005. And these magnetometer readings are very, very interesting, and they certainly correlate with that data. And what they show, which was also observed by the Japanese magnetometer readings, is a frequency of 2.5 hertz for a couple of days before that earthquake. And that is the frequency actually that triggers earthquakes with this HAARP technology. So I think that we're collecting much more information and understanding how HAARP works, and also finding the forensic evidence on their own sites to prove that what we're saying is correct.
Right. Now, there is uh, it, there have been various accounts, and people have been asking and saying that there were events in the sun which correlate with the various dates of the earthquake, or events in other astronomical uh, entities like the galactic black hole. And I just want to go through and test for the fact that it appears as though the data shows that it was HAARP and not these solar events or these other galactic astronomical events that caused the Fukushima earthquake event.
Well, the tectonic warfare is actually designed to release huge amounts of energy that are part of natural events. And so in an earthquake zone, and the major earthquake zones are at the tectonic plate boundaries around the world, where the continents, these tectonic plates, sort of meet, or they're marginal to each other. Those fault lines and they're actually collision zones, have tremendous amounts of stresses that build up, and they build up and build up, and that's called the elastic limit. And when they reach a certain point where they have enough energy stored up to suddenly release it, that's called reaching the elastic limit. And that would be like pulling a rubber band and pulling a rubber band tighter and tighter until it breaks. So what would trigger these excess amounts of energy in a fault zone? Well, something just as simple as a high tide, which adds a tremendous amount of burden or an overload, a load on a fault zone. Actually, high tides very frequently trigger uh, um, earthquakes. And now this HAARP tectonic warfare technology is designed to be used in fault zone areas where these faults are overdue for an earthquake, and where huge stresses have been stored up and accumulated. And that's how they triggered the Sumatra earthquake, which threw the whole island of Sumatra 14 miles, 14 feet, to a new position. And just the Fukushima earthquake, which was, this is for a 9.0 earthquake. I had Marion Falk, who's one of the last Manhattan Project scientists who solved all the problems on the hydrogen bomb and made it work for the U.S. I asked him to calculate what the nuclear bomb equivalent energy was released from the Fukushima or Tohoku earthquake on March 11th, and he calculated it and said it's 1,030,000 KT, kiloton nuclear bombs the size of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So this is releasing much more of a shockwave, a destructive shockwave that than a nuclear weapon can release. And it's great because no one thinks it's, they just all think it's a natural event, an unfortunate earthquake and tsunami. And they just pick themselves up and go on to clean up the disaster and rebuild their communities and their lives and their country. But in the case of Fukushima and some of these other earthquakes that we know are triggered by HAARP, it's not a natural event. It's an artificially triggered natural event, which is a natural event that's been weaponized for the benefit of whoever is triggering it. Now, um, the way that they are pumping extra energy into that fault line to destabilize it, as we know from the magnetometer readings and from the atmospheric irregularities reported for a week over that fault area. And that also, geologists around the world are noticing that that also happened in Haiti before the Haiti earthquake, and it's happened in other earthquakes, which is not normal. It was not observed in the past. And so the the way that they're doing it is to pump very intense, very focused energy in radio waves. These are L for extra low frequency waves into a fault zone. And that increases the heat and the stress. And finally, after about 5 days of these daily pulsing into the fault zone, they can trigger an earthquake. Now, when a sunspot event happens, that energy that is released is not just diffused over the planet Earth, it's also diffused throughout the solar system and also the universe. And it's not focused, it's not pulsed, it's just a random event, which has always happened. And so it would not really be suitable for triggering earthquakes. Now, what also goes along with this is that it is the Department of Energy and intelligence assets who are putting the sunspot theory out as the reason for these earthquakes. They're the ones behind the weapon of mass destruction. They're deciding how to use it and how to benefit from it. So I just don't think that's a credible theory. You have to ask scientists, not politicians and intelligence agents and bankers who are really gangsters.
Right. Now, uh, uh, there was an international HARP experiment from March 2nd to 9th at Tromsø, Norway. Is that sort of the like the drill exercise that they had on 9/11 on the day of September 11th, 2001, where they were simulating the hijacking of airliners?
Well, I think so. I mean, they may have even participated in it. It could have been a practice for them. Monitoring what the U.S. was doing. Certainly, the signal was transmitted from Gakona, but it could have come from other transmitters as well. Um, the This was called the International Experiment on the Research of Ionosphere Heating Phenomena, initiated by powerful HF radio waves provided by ISCAT at Tromsø, Norway. That's ISCAT is that international organization or coalition of Britain, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Japan, China, Finland, and Russia was there too. Two researchers, M. Shevets and E. Dubrovsky, participated in this international experiment. And they are from the PGI, or the let's see, it's called the uh, Geophysical Institute in Russia, Murmansk. and they were certainly there. I don't know why they would be there unless this was of interest to a much larger community of scientists. But it's pretty interesting that they were there since they were partners with the U.S. in developing HAARP. So um, the Japanese magnetometers were also picking up steady frequencies in the 2.5 to 3 hertz range, which led up to the largest March earthquake. This was the largest one in the whole period of 150 years that Japan has been recording and monitoring earthquakes. So that is the resonant frequency that creates earthquakes that the Japanese were picking up even on their own magnetometer. Now, the Russia group, it's PGI is the Polar Geophysical Institute, and it was established October 11th in 1960. So this Polar Geophysical Institute, represented at the experiment in Tromsø, is located in Murmansk, but they also have facilities on the Kola Peninsula, in Barentsburg, which is in the Spitsbergen archipelago, and that's sort of in the area where the Russians did the big hydrogen bomb tests to experiment or to study the ionosphere in order to develop HAARP. The PGI researchers, Shevets and Dubrovsky, were in Tromsø between March 2nd and 9th. So they were definitely there. The Russians, interestingly enough, have a HAARP facility at Sura, Sura. It's called the Sura Ionospheric Heating Facility, and it's actually called the Sura HAARP Facility, but it's obvious from the date when it was established, 1981, that it's 12 years older than the HAARP facility the U.S. has constructed or developed in Gakona, Alaska. That project began in 1993. So the Russians are definitely leading the research on this HAARP technology. Now, it says officially in the Sura website, the Sura facility was commissioned in 1981. Oh, I'm sorry, it was 1981. Using this facility, Russian researchers achieved extremely interesting results regarding the ionosphere behavior and discovered the effect of generation of low-frequency emission at the modulation of ionosphere current. So the American HAARP ionospheric heater at Gakona is very similar to the Sura facility. They look the same from the air. And of course, the U.S. project started 12 years later. Now, that facility is at Nizhny Novgorod. And I believe that is one of the places where Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab scientists worked during the Cold War with Soviet scientists, and took equipment and money and technology, experimental stuff over there. This international HAARP experiment coalition, ISCAT, has a lot of descriptions about their program, and it's very, very interesting that they monitor things like noctilucent clouds. These are the shimmering clouds that have been reported over the fault zones just before earthquakes. And they've been observed in China before the China earthquake. They've been observed over the New Madrid Fault in the United States, which people are worried about that being triggered. That sort of goes north-south in the kind of the mid-eastern part of the United States, sort of in the Mississippi River area. And that's a very, very, very serious fault, although it's not going to split North America, the continent, into two pieces, because the roots of the continent are like the roots of teeth. they go very deep into the mantle, and earthquakes would not release enough energy to split a continent. It might happen through plate tectonics, through continental collisions, but we're just talking about movement along a fault zone uh, in mid-continent. So it's not quite as easy to split it as something like Japan. Um, so it's pretty darn convincing that these people are in partnership, that it is HAARP technologies. The plasma resonances they're studying are 4 to 8 megahertz. The British also have one. It's called SPARS, SPARS, Space Plasma Environment and Radio Science, and it's located at Lancaster University in the Department of Physics. Now, their major projects are suborbital magnetometer network, imaging ryometer for ionospheric studies, digital all-sky imager Mark II, interferometer, that is definitely HAARP, and another sky imager. So the group's main interest is it's in European incoherent scatter facility research, and the Tromsø one is owned by 6 nations, including the UK, which consists of 3 of the most sophisticated high power, ultra high frequency, and very high frequency radar systems in the world. And ISCAT at Tromsø has the world's largest high power HF transmitter, capable of temporarily modifying the natural ionosphere for fundamental wave plasma and radio propagation. And they even talk about climate, influencing climate and tectonic sort of environmental issues. Now, that coalition, including Russia as a guest there, were definitely monitoring what the U.S. was doing from Gakona, Alaska, in the week that the U.S. was doing the heating over in the plate margin areas on the east side of Japan, and in the north area where the earthquake occurred offshore from Fukushima. So it's certainly partners in crime, I would say. And it also makes it very clear that it is the citizens of these countries that are attacked with HAARP who are the real target. It is not militaries targeting other militaries. It is countries with these facilities targeting citizens. And I think it's a very, very, very dangerous technology. It's a very dangerous project they're embarking on, and it extends to CERN in Switzerland, which now has the capability to destroy the Earth, to turn it into a black hole, to split it in half. And so what they're using are Nikola Tesla technologies, which he suggested and developed and tested over 100 years ago. And the poor man had all of his intellectual property stolen from him, ripped off, and he died poor. He must have been murdered in a hotel room, because the FBI went in on behalf of the Rockefellers and cleaned out his laboratory, all of his documents and experiments, all of his notes, and just took everything. And I don't think it's any accident that the south boundary of the Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab is named Tesla Avenue, because it's at Livermore is where the HAARP technology project was conducted secretly with the Soviets, and that was under the cover of the Star Wars and National Ballistic Missile Defense and National Missile Defense.
Well, it looks like Tesla-based technologies are the fundamental technology for all of the black ops, from the HAARP black ops to the quantum access to the time-space hologram, in terms of the teleportation black ops technology, which is Tesla-based, and the time travel technology, which is Tesla-based. But this new finding of yours confirms what many researchers stated, and that was that the November 9th, 2009 spiral, which appeared over Tromsø, Norway, the night before President Barack Obama accepted his Nobel Peace Prize, was indeed an artifact of HAARP and not a Russian rocket. It sort of appeared otherworldly, and people have said that it's part of Project Bluebeam, and that is the use of the mind control conditioning aspects of HAARP. So what you're saying now is that we really have almost various tiers. We have at the top of the pyramid, or at the top of the tiers, the kind of the puppet masters that are the international bloodlines to the
Yes.
black nobility, to the Queen of England, to the Zionist to the Zionist bloodlines at the city of London and up through Moscow. Then that comes down to the various nation states. Not surprisingly, the communist nation states, because both Lenin and Mao were Illuminati projects, the Skull and Bones project, through Harriman and Bush's grandfather, George W. Bush's grandfather, and Skull and Bones basically funded Bolshevism and communism and capitalism. And Mao Zedong was a Yale in China project.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah,
that's right.
And then you've got the UK and the US. The US is sort of the main kind of battlefront or muscle for this. And I'm surprised that Israel that doesn't have a HAARP facility, but I guess they're the trigger masters, or maybe the targeters.
Well, it's not clear why they don't, but they may have privileges at these facilities. There's certainly a lot of them at Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab. There are a lot of Israeli visitors, and we've had an Israeli astronaut on the space shuttle. So Israel is definitely part of it, but it may be a hidden part. Now, what a radio host told me just a couple of weeks ago, she's in San Diego, and when I was mentioning NASA and Google, and the fact that the two Google owners, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, parked their planes, their private planes, at the NASA facility in Mountain View, the woman said, "Oh my God." She said, an engineer who works at that NASA facility told me at night, many Israelis come into the NASA facility. So the Israelis are part of it too, but it's in a more hidden way.
Right. So how do you square that with Barack Obama today suggesting that the Israeli-Palestine go back to the 1967 borders, which is what the Palestinians were asking for? Is that like to secure an even playing field vis-a-vis the Arab world? And is that just a different level of the chess game?
Oh, I just think that Obama is absolutely was chosen and created as a black man to carry out this genocide against white people, the whole North American continent. and that huge spiral over Norway when he received his Nobel Peace Prize was an ironic sort of ha-ha by the CIA or the this collection of coalition of partners who are really at the top of the pyramid, because he's their step and fetch it guy to carry out all these HAARP events. And look what he's done. Look at the HAARP events, the tornado episode in the southern United States, Fukushima, which will change forever the North American continent, not to mention it will be contaminated forever with very, very, very dangerous fission products. And while the military manipulated weather to rain for 2 straight weeks, day and night, along the whole west coast of North America, certainly the United States, Obama took his wife and children to the southern hemisphere, never mentioned the danger and never has since, and avoided contamination while he left the whole country that he's the head of and the head of the military too to take their dose without a whimper. And not only that, the governor of California, Jerry Brown, who has already been a governor for 2 terms, his sister works for Goldman Sachs, and he declared a state emergency in a number of counties, I think 19 counties, because of all the flooding caused by the military rainout of Obama's nuclear war on the United States. Well, it goes beyond Obama, but it's indicated by his appointment of Dr. Stephen Chu, who won the Nobel Prize for Solar Energy at Stanford. He was moved to the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, which is the home of the Manhattan Project, and received $500 million from BP. He was only there 2 years, just as a holding place, until Obama became president. He immediately appointed Stephen Chu as Secretary of Energy, and Stephen Chu immediately appointed a British petroleum scientist called Dr. Coonan, and so he's the one of the undersecretaries of science, and they oversaw the BP disaster in the Gulf. So what is this resulting in? What this is resulting in is a chemical, a very, very nasty chemical pollution, contamination of the southern United States and the eastern United States, which will combine with this radioactive pollution that's arriving from Fukushima, very dangerous fission products, and chemicals plus radiation interact synergistically and multiply the effects of each other. So we're getting huge doses of ionizing radiation and very, very dangerous, more than 1,300, more than 1,300 fission products from Japan, and the East Coast and the southern states are getting a chemical and radioactive cocktail in all their food, their drinking water, and in the air. So clearly, this is having a dreadful, a long-lasting effect, a terrible economic hit on North America, and that includes Canada, the US, and Mexico. And this is exactly what they did to the Soviet Union with Chernobyl. They're using these horrific environmental events to bring about transformations in the geopolitical realm.
Well, just to follow up with that, with two kind of the Illuminati mouthpieces, one of whom was former U.S. President Bill Clinton, who of course is a principal in the Bush doping Mena, Arkansas cocaine gang during his term of office in Little Rock as governor, and I think that that's fairly well proven. I recall very distinctly a scene where Barack Obama was first elected president, and Bill Clinton was on the podium with him, kind of introducing him and saying, and these are the exact words, "This is Barack Obama. He's going to be your executioner." That's the
Yeah.
exact, he says, he's going to
Yeah.
execute the laws. But the executioner was the double entendre. It's a
Yes.
Masonic thing. And
Yes.
Obama uses a lot of that where they stick their
Yes. Yeah.
tongue in their mouth.
Yeah.
That's a Masonic thing, is tongue in cheek.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is Obama, this is your executioner. Now, I'm thinking that we've talked about is this not an artificial intelligence that's directing all of this?
I believe that it
New
is.
World Order?
I live in the city of Berkeley, and the University of California and San Francisco State University, probably all the state universities, have been using directed energy weapons and mind control and social engineering on their campuses since the early 1960s. And that was stated in an official U.S. Air Force report by a colonel. I don't remember his name, but I was not surprised to read it because I was an undergraduate at UC Davis in the 60s, and the monkey colony there has been used. It was set up even before the 60s and used since then to develop the mind control technology in animal studies to be applied to humans. And the photo that I have in about 1964 of Nelson Rockefeller beside Edward Teller at the dedication of the Applied Science Facility, new science facility in Davis, was exactly where the animal studies were applied for human application. And I interviewed a man who was kidnapped. His name is Dave Sylvie. He's written a book called Project Artichoke, which people can buy through Amazon, about his experience as since his childhood, since he was 8 years old, where he was experimented on with MK Ultra and with mind control chemicals and with EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, in the safe house, which was at Livermore. And Project Artichoke is how they created Manchurian candidates. And that's actually where he saw Sirhan Sirhan 3 days before the Bobby Kennedy assassination at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. And Dave said, "I can't remember anything at that time, but I am sure that I was there too."
Exactly. These are very rich areas and shows the interlocking of all these events over 4 decades. But we actually have only about 12 minutes left in this segment. The time has gone by so quickly, and I know that there are at least 2 major parts. One is that the contamination levels exposed by non-governmental monitoring stations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty show that the largest radiation releases were in the first week. And I wonder if you could walk us through some of this and also
Sure.
through the behavior of TEPCO, the Japanese
Yes.
power company, and within the time left that we have.
Yes. Well, what the only really good data that we've been able to get is from the International Non-Proliferation Treaty monitoring facilities that have very sophisticated equipment, and they can do air monitoring as well as make other measurements. And they are non-governmental, so we're able to get more information from them. And the Takasaki station in Gunma, Japan, in the north of Japan, their reports were released by the Ministry of Education. And the data tables of their air monitoring are extremely alarming, and they expose the TEPCO and the Japanese government, the US government, the Canadian government are all lying, the international agencies. And what the data table indicates that the largest radiation releases from Fukushima were in the first week after the March 11th earthquake. That's when the explosions occurred in Building 1, Building 3, where the MOX fuel was, Building 2, and then Building 4. And there were extremely high levels, March 15th and 16th, reported in the data. But the data for March 14th to 15th is missing. And that was when the explosion occurred in the reactor 3, the MOX fuel pool. And there were the first increased radiation levels were detected after March 14th. So there was some kind of very, very large event in reactor 3 that did not occur in the other reactors. Explosions. Now, there were some releases of radioactive iodine and radioactive cesium on March 19th. There were more releases of radiation on March 21st, 30th, April 18th, and those were probably related to activities that they were doing to try to respond. TEPCO was trying to respond to an absolutely impossible disaster. It's not only is every reactor much larger than Chernobyl, but there are 6 of them, and there were 600 spent fuel rods in cooling pools. So this is the greatest radiation disaster in the history of the world, and people don't even know about it. Now, on March 16th, that's the only time that huge amounts of iodine-135 were released. The half-life is less than 10 hours. So there had to be a nuclear event, and that coincided with the explosion at Reactor 3. Mr. Hiroaki Koide from Kyoto University mentioned this mysterious iodine-135. The levels were so high, the Takasaki station couldn't even measure it. It went off scale. And the result is that he said the huge amount of iodine-135 supports the speculation of a nuclear explosion at the number 3 reactor on March 14th. And we know now that it was in the spent fuel pool. The land surface contamination now from this data table indicates cesium-137 as high as 80 curies, or 3 million becquerels per square kilometer in Iitate village, which is 37 kilometers or about 25 miles from Fukuoka, and levels as high as 1.4 curies per square kilometer in Chiba, which is 220 kilometers from Fukushima. So that's about 130 or 40 miles. This is horrendous. And the proof that this is getting into all of the plant material and contaminating the whole environment, and it's supporting the fact that all of northern Japan should be evacuated, because a professor, Bin Mori of Tokyo University Graduate School of Agricultural and Life Sciences, provided autoradiographs on his blog of dandelion leaves. And this actually shows the particles of radioactive materials that landed on the leaves, and this is supporting the evidence and the reality that it's landing on all our food here in the United States too.
Now, let me ask you a question there. Two questions. Number one, is radiation still coming over
Yes.
and being directed
Yes.
through the troposphere to North
Yes.
America and into the
Yes.
Northern Hemisphere?
Yes. Yes.
And
And we also have a debris island of tsunami debris. It's at least 40 miles across. The Navy observed it. That is all of the building materials and cars and trucks and even whole houses bobbing along in the Pacific. It's all contaminated with radiation, and
right,
it will be washing up on our shorelines and then the shorelines of Hawaii. The whole North American coastline up to the Aleutians will be contaminated for years by this radioactive trash that will be floating up onto our beaches, and we won't even want to be taking our children to beaches along the West Coast, much less eating anything out of the Pacific Ocean.
now uh, these are just horrible facts, but I want to get them out on the record. In terms of the radiation released, we know that there was a huge cover up at Chernobyl that was intended as a kill shot for the Soviet Union, and that
Correct.
about a million people have died,
That's correct.
perhaps more. In terms of Fukushima, do you have an estimate of the radiation that has been brought over to North America and to the Northern Hemisphere and released in, and is continuing to be released into the Northern Hemisphere? Are we talking a million atom bombs? Are we talking what? Like, is this a kill shot for North America?
This is a kill shot for North America. This is contaminating all of the Japanese agriculture, food sources, drinking water, agricultural water, all of North America from Canada to Mexico, including Hawaii, and it's radioactive isotopes that have
Okay, now,
half-lives of millions of years.
can you quantify the amount of radiation? For example, when
More
it
than
was,
Chernobyl. Other than that, I can't possibly quantify it.
it's what? Sorry.
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. It's we have so little data. It would be impossible to estimate now, but we do know it's more than Chernobyl.
So it's at least 6 Chernobyls plus plutonium.
Yeah.
Yeah, and each of the units was larger than the Chernobyl plant.
That's correct. But
And
see, Chernobyl did not blow up the spent fuel rods.
right.
This is what makes Fukushima so much more dangerous and so different.
So it could be 1,000 Chernobyls.
It could be. It could be. We have no idea. We just have no idea. And then
Okay.
it'll start
Now,
washing up on the shorelines.
Why is it that that question, which is a crucial question, is not being addressed on either side of the fence? I mean,
Because they don't want to answer it. They
no,
want to.
but
They want
why?
to dose us first and then tell us later.
Yeah.
They don't want us to know.
Now, can anybody in the alternative analysis community, part of the resistance of the population, we are the People's Army, we are the people. Is there anybody on our side that can address that question and answer it within X degree of certainty? So we know the ballpark that we're dealing with. Is it 1,000 Chernobyls? Is it, a million?
Oh, I know exactly who knows. Dr. Chu and Dr. Coonan. They planned this. They pulled it off, and they're covering it up. And they're also directing TEPCO in what to do, along with General Electric.
When are we going to begin to see a die-off of the North American population?
Well, the Japanese, within 60 miles or 90 miles of Fukushima, the teachers already have they're reporting radiation disease and rashes on their skin. They are already exhibiting radiation sickness. And what we'll see immediately is a drop in fertility in North America of at least one child per woman in 1 year.
Now, there was that motion picture Zardos, starring Sean Connery. that may have been an Illuminati foreshadowing of the Fukushima event. And that is where it's a post-apocalyptic world. The human population is radiated, and they are turning into, all of their features have been affected by radiation, and they're breeding, so that they're kind of hybrids affected by radiation. Do you think that the humans in the northern hemisphere, 10 years down the road, or how many years down the road will it be before the humans are affected?
They're already affected. We'll see a big decline in infant mortality this year in North America
You mean
because
a big
radiation,
decline in infant
if
mortality? You
a
mean a big
big decline in,
increase?
can I explain
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
We'll see a big decline in infant mortality in 2011, 2012 because the women who are pregnant in their first weeks of pregnancy, 80% of those embryos that are exposed to even low levels of radiation will either be aborted or reabsorbed by the woman's body. So that will decrease the number of babies born, but it also will kill the weaker babies out of the embryos in the first, say, 3 or 4 weeks. That a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant when they go through the airport scanners. When they live near nuclear power plants, they have trouble carrying babies. They lose their babies. This is why. Or they don't even know they're pregnant and they're unpregnant before they even know they're pregnant. Now, the new film called After the Apocalypse is a documentary film that was premiered in London on March 11th. This is the reality. This is the documentary of that film, Zardos, that you were talking about. This is the reality of all the nuclear bomb tests that were conducted in Kazakhstan at Semipalatinsk and what the people look like now. And it is exactly what Zardov was made about in a fictional sense, but this is reality, and this is what North America is going to look like in time. We will see more and more people with mixed sexual aspects. We'll see higher sterility and infertility. We will see feminized men and masculinized women because these hormone and estrogen effects of radiation are very subtle, but they're already being expressed. I saw them in Portland, Oregon a month ago. There were women at meetings that I went to who had beards and mustaches, and women with physiques and bodies like men, and men who were very feminine. So it's already happening. All you have to do is go now to cities that are close to nuclear facilities, and certainly Portland is on the Columbia River, which is completely contaminated by Hanford Nuclear Weapons Lab and by the nuclear power plant, the Trojan reactor that was on the Columbia River. It's turned off now, but it's feminized the men and masculinized the women already, and you can see it everywhere.
Right. And one final question, which just kind of struck me, because the fact that that documentary screened on March 11th seems like too coincidental.
It's not a coincidence. And remember, that was Russian bomb testing in Kazakhstan. The Mongolians have told me now that the Chinese did nuclear bomb tests in Mongolia, and the Chinese now are growing potatoes for the Mongolian food supply in their nuclear test site so that they're feeding and selling radioactive potatoes to Mongolians. And it's all about depopulation in Kazakhstan and in Mongolia. And this Mongolian woman said, I'm not from Mongolia, I'm from Miningolia. And a woman from Mongolia a few years ago went to the Livermore nuclear weapons lab for 2 years. Who knows what she was doing, but she went back to Mongolia and started a whole uranium mining industry in Mongolia, and the whole environment is being contaminated just like we did, or I should say the British bankers did, with the Indian reservations in the Southwest, where they poisoned the whole Navajo reservation with uranium mining activities.
So now what we have is we have documented proof, starting with the top tier of the Zionist bankers and the City of London bankers and the royal bloodlines in the black nobility and the British aristocracy and crown. Now coming down to all of the major nations, which are just kind of shills for them, are in fact that leadership, which is an Illuminati leadership and part of the Illuminati pyramid. Fascism and communism are all up just under Aleister Crowley. All of those are carrying out the depopulation programs put in motion by the Rockefellers prior to Hitler and adopted by the British Crown and according to the Zionist plans, the Zionist bloodline plans. And it's all through radiation. That seems like a future to you. Do you see any bright light coming out of there?
Well, I was in denial for 8 years. I thought this was all an accident, but 2 years ago I got completely converted when I did a search on Google for the University of California plus Skull and Bones. And that took me straight to the bankers, the nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, depopulation. It's all for the bankers and the British Crown and other royal thrones in Europe and around the world. And it's no accident that most HAARP facilities are located by very large mining projects over the next century for British-owned mining companies.
So basically, they're carrying out the project of reducing the population of this planet, like the Georgia Guidestones say, to about 500 million and a master-slave class system.
Well, I don't know about the Georgia Guidestones, but you don't need those to see it and figure it out. I've looked at the decline in fertility in Iran. Iran is in a secret nuclear war carried out from Afghanistan and Iraq, and the monsoon continually rains out or snows out more and more radiation into Iran. Now, Iran had very large families. The women had 8 or more children. That was the average size of the family in Iran in 1986. 1 year after Chernobyl, it dropped by one child to 7 children. But today, after 20 years of uranium wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yugoslavia, the fertility rate of Iranian women is less than 1.6 children. That population, like the Japanese population, is going extinct, and that is also what's happening in Israel to the Jewish population. They are decreasing, their birth rate is lower than their death rate, while the Palestinian population is increasing. So they've nuked themselves, and all we have to do is sit and wait.
Well, on that note, we're come come to the end. We've gone a bit over, but we've come to the end of this segment. Uh, uh, Sitting and waiting goes against the grain of many of us who, at least if we're going to sit, let's stay as healthy as we can and as alert as we can. So we'd like to invite you back for a special program to look at just lifestyle changes and consciousness changes that we all should engage in this new, what should we call it, the brave new world of ionizing radiation. Thank you very much, Leuren.
Thank you.